Welcome back to the Ageless Pet Podcast with your host, Dr. Gabby Barco.
And Dr. Carmen Balsani.
And today we wanted to pivot from what we were going to talk about and talk about disaster preparedness for pets. Disaster can strike at any time, and it's really important to plan to keep your family and pets safe. We decided to do this today in light of the wildfires going on in the northern part of California, LA, because we're down in San Diego. But we thought it was important to have resources on what to do to prepare for disaster and what you can do during the chaos of an emergency. So Los Angeles County has more than 10 million people, and almost half of them have pets. So there's an estimated 2 million dogs and cats and about 300,000 birds. So know what's going on in your area, know if you can shelter in place or if it's not safe to stay in your home and you have to leave. If it's not safe for you, it's not safe for them either, so plan ahead. And in the event of an evacuation, if you must leave your pets behind, never, never, never tie them up. It goes without saying. Yeah,
that's a big deal. Gabby and I were talking about this. I live in a rural part of San Diego County, and I had evacuated 3 times from our house, 2003, 2008, and 2019. And you kind of get used to it, unfortunately, the evacuation, but you also get pretty good at it and knowing what to grab and what not to. So the hardest thing is for the first time people, like these people in Pacific Palisades, et cetera. You know, no one would ever expect that they would be hit by a wildfire, kind of like the people in North Carolina this year with the floods, et cetera. So, but there's a few things that are really important. And if you are under mandatory evacuation orders, please just evacuate. That's such a big deal. We all hear about these horrible stories of people dying in their homes trying to, fight this off. Not only that, it puts fire personnel at risk because now they have to save you when you're trapped as well and divert their attention from saving homes and et cetera. So if conditions are unsafe, don't wait. Just evacuate early to avoid traffic, et cetera. When we evacuated from our house the first time, there was a traffic jam of about 20 minutes, and thank God there was no fire there, or else we would have done the same things with people in the Palisades that would just leave your car behind, et cetera. Right. So it's better to leave early. When you get that or you think you are going to be evacuated, get ready. Sometimes you don't have time, but get ready and evacuate. Know which hotels and motels along your evacuation route will accept pets in an emergency. That's really important. Call ahead for reservations if you know you may need to evacuate. You'll definitely ask if they have a no-pet policy, that if that can be waived during an emergency, and make sure that there are outside areas for their pets to be using and so forth. So, a lot of times I know we'll cover this, but shelters like the ASPCA and et cetera will take pets, and even veterinarians will take pets. When we had our first and second fires, I worked at a large veterinary hospital that had a large boarding facility, and we took in a lot of pets. Yeah. And then one of the times our hospital had to get evacuated, and we took, I think it was 40 pets that were in the hospital to the ASPCA, and they took them all without any questions. So, but it's just really important to know these things. Call ahead to your veterinarian and also to the ASPCA or your local shelter, et cetera. Also friends, so know your friends and family, boarding facilities, animal shelters, et cetera, like I just said. And prepare a list of phone numbers and contact information. I know this sounds like it's a lot to do, but it's not. It's not really a whole lot to do to write down these emergency contacts. And we have horses too, and so we have on our barn a list of contact information, emergency contact information as well.
That's so smart.
Well, it wasn't smart the first time. After the first time, then we learned. So be prepared and have a separate sheet or a separate. Be prepared to separate your pets if you need to, because sometimes you can't take them all in the same place. And keep in mind that these facilities are likely to be overwhelmed. So it's hard. Be kind and be aware that everyone is stressed out and everyone's doing their best to do what they can do. But I also find that during these times, the goodness in people far exceeds the badness in people.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of people come out to help. And
they really do.
And with these facilities being so overwhelmed, it's not, people don't like to hear it, but you might have to separate your pets. Right. If you have more than one pet, you might have to put them in different facilities because they might just not have room.
Right.
Yeah, so the ASPCA recommends using a rescue sticker alert to let people know that pets inside your home, and that's just for general safety, not like, oh, you're going to do it right before there's a disaster. So just having a place that is easily visible for people that come to your house, and state the types and number of pets that you have in your household. Sometimes there's a line for your veterinarian's phone number. So if you can do that, and then if you must evacuate, and if time allows, write evacuated across the sticker so rescue workers know that they don't have to go in to rescue the pets that you have in the home. That's just really important.
It's a really good idea. We don't have that sticker on our window or anything, so near your front window or whatever would be the best. But yeah, use a Sharpie and even just write it across the window. Evacuated would be a good thing. So we have that in our barn, and if they're evacuated, we do have a sign. So hopefully it doesn't get burned up, but it's there.
At least it's there. And I do have one of those stickers. It's pretty faded, so I actually went on the ASPCA website and just ordered a new one, so that it's nice and new and crisp and visible.
Yeah, and that's like Gabby said earlier. It's really, if an event like a major emergency, it's really important. But even if like you're not home, you're at work, and your house starts to catch on fire or whatever, that's really important for the firefighters and so forth to know. So. So, I mean, this area is horses and other large animals. I know a lot of people listening to this podcast may or may not have horses. I mean, a lot of people who have dogs actually have horses too.
Yeah.
So there's a risk of fire to consider relocating them to a safe place early, so you don't need to worry about transporting them in the middle of emergency. It's really stressful to try to load your horses up into your trailer at that time when everything's going on. So the earlier you get them in, the better they are. Get your horse used to wearing a halter if they're not. Hopefully most horses are, but a halter with an ID tag is really important. Get them used to trailing, practice evacuations, drills, and done safely. But when you're stressed, the horses feel that stress too. So it's a whole lot easier just to get them and do it earlier and get them used to it. Make sure they're used to loading into your trailer if you have one. The first time we evacuated, we did not have a trailer, and we were lucky enough that a friend came down and let us use their trailer.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
We got really lucky with that. And the halter, I think we talk about this later, but the halter should have their identification name and near home, etc. I've even seen people, again, with a Sharpie write on their horse, literally the name of the horse.
I believe it.
And the address and et cetera, phone number. So even if it's just a phone number where you can be reached, it's really important.
So smart.
And then, we'll talk about that later. Never mind. So I don't want to go.
Okay.
Birds are a big deal. Reptiles, small animals like, your little mice, your gerbils, your rabbits, etc. But, birds they should be used to being in a cage anyways, but you should always have a small cage available for them. So make sure you have a secure cage or carrier. I have both. We have a carrier that we can put our birds in for a short period of time just to transport in the car. And then we also have small cages that they can survive in for a week. Nothing luxurious, but something where their tail's not getting munched up, by the bottom of the cage, and there's enough food for water, and they can spread their wings out. It's always nice to have a blanket or a towel to be able to cover the cage, especially when they're stressed or if they're cold. If it's hot, bring a spray bottle to keep the feathers moist. Sometimes an ice pack is nice to have around there as well. So these are all just these different things. Having photos of your birds are really important. If they have leg bands or identification, it's good. People are pretty aware of microchipping for dogs and cats and horses, but you can microchip anything. My birds are microchipped as well, so if anything happens, then they can scan them. Usually at humane societies or veterinary hospitals will have scanners, and that'll happen. So, and you just definitely need to make sure that they have enough food for them, because birds are very picky and they're used to eating what they're eating. So you try to feed them something new and it might not happen. So make sure they're eating on a daily basis. If you have to get a timed feeder because you have to leave them, then that might be good as well. But their food, make sure you bring their food. Make sure you bring anything that's going to be comfortable. But caging is really important. Carriers are really important.
What about reptiles? How do you transport reptiles?
Well, it depends on the reptile. A lot of people will transport a reptile like a snake in a pillowcase. They put them in there and they seem to be okay with that. And the larger, like the bearded dragons and the lizards, et cetera, they usually are going into carriers.
Mm-hmm.
Amphibians are a little harder, but they can go in carriers as long as they're moist as well, or they don't dry out. So, they're sometimes a little harder, but have a large, dirtier container for them so you can soak them if they need to. Like, a lot of snakes like to be soaked, and lizards like to be soaked as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good idea to have a heating pad. That's actually really important, and other warming devices, because they are animals that require external heat to keep warm. So if you get into a hotel and it's 68 degrees, they need to be up in the upper 80s, low 90s, even higher sometimes. So definitely having a heating pad is really important, or some other light or something. So that's good. So those guys, like anyone who's a reptile person, should know what you have in your house and what's important. Again, food. Reptiles can usually go for a few days without eating. It's not that big of a deal, but heat, and again, somewhere to keep them safe is really good. Small animals like hamsters, gerbils, mice, guinea pigs, rabbits, etc. Again, transport in a secure carrier. So we have multiple carriers for multiple of our animals. We have a lot of animals, so that's important. And bedding materials, food bowls. Make sure they have a water bottle, whether they use a lick bottle or a bowl is important. In an area where they can comfortably hide in, such as like a little hide box or anything else. Make sure you have plenty of bedding for them too. So rabbits in particular, we see a lot of rabbits, and rabbits get pretty stressed out, about anything. I mean, you can leave the house at an abnormal time and they'll get stressed out. So just be aware of that. So make sure their food is like they eat a lot of hay. So make sure you have plenty of hay around there. Make sure you have plenty of pellets. It might not be ideal, but at least they're living and they're okay. So, and again, there are collapsible cages. Those are really great. They're not luxurious, but those little collapsing cages that collapse into basically like a little suitcase, and those are great for birds and small, rabbits, guinea pigs, etc., to get them where you need to get them. So
and probably having multiple carriers, if you have multiple pets, in the stress, they might not get along. Correct. And so making sure that you're keeping them separate unless they're extremely bonded and will be better together, but just knowing that you can't just throw a bunch of animals in one carrier. You're going to need a few. Yeah,
I mean, sometimes you have to. I mean, I remember doing that same thing, putting our rabbit and our guinea pig in the same container and just running out the door.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes you
can't.
It. But yeah, and after that first 2003 episode, we realized that we definitely need to get multiple carriers. So like I said, I think we have definitely more carriers now than we have animals, but I'd rather have it that way than not. So
so those are great tips, because a lot of people have pets that are not just dogs and cats, and we just wanted to touch on that because it can be a little challenging to find out what to do and how to transport them, especially if you've never had to, or you're new to having some of these pets and something happens. So what do we have to do to be available and ready before an emergency? So there's a few things that you can do just to prepare ahead of time. So pet identification and documentation is really important.
For sure.
Identification tags, make sure that they have a collar with an up-to-date ID tag. A lot of the collars, you can embroider the phone number. They have really nice, permanent tags, so it doesn't always have to be the dangly tags. Make sure your phone number's on there and emergency contact information. So a name and phone number, if nothing else, a phone number. And then, like Carmine mentioned, in the case of birds, make sure that they have a leg band. Another way to identify pets, too, will be pictures. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But just anything you could do, especially any identifying marks or something that are unique to them. And then if your pet has a chronic medical condition, it's a good idea to have a tag stating that your pet is on medication or needs specific care, kind of like a medical alert bracelet that people wear.
Right.
So it's just important for somebody to know, hey, there is something going on with this dog. And, if there's a veterinarian available, at least do an exam and see if it's something that's obvious. but at least it's on somebody's radar to make sure that that pet needs help, make sure they're eating and drinking, and that they have what they need. If they seem stiff or painful, that they get the treatment they need.
Make sure that collar fits appropriately.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many people have these really loose-fitting collars, and in stressful circumstances, someone tries to grab a collar and the pet just slips away, and bye-bye.
That's it.
So it's fitting the collar appropriately, and as Gabby said, the identification. We have these identification tags that slip kind of right over the collar, kind of like an emergency, like she said, the bracelets, so they don't dangle, because the dangling drives me bananas. But on the back side of it'll say if there's any medical condition that they need.
That's great.
They're actually made for humans, but they
nice.
make a variety for pets as well.
That's great. I love when people do that. And then microchipping. So if your pets are not microchipped, make sure you get them microchipped. And make sure the information's up to date. Like, log in and make sure, because sometimes you don't even remember last time you had the information in, and it's somebody else's phone number, or you moved.
Yeah, exactly.
So just checking that the information is up to date.
Right. An emergency contact list is really important. That should include your your veterinarian, your local shelters, boarding facilities, anyone who cares for your pet. So the hardest thing is you're thinking about local areas, but your vet could also be evacuated. Your shelter could also be evacuated. So think about the local people, but also think about maybe something a little further. I mean, we had to evacuate, oh my God, it was probably 50 miles away one time. So it was a big deal to make sure that we have these things ahead of time. Pet records. Really, really, really important to keep a copy of your pet's vaccination records. The hardest thing, one of these things is, everyone's going to take your pets in, but sometimes it's like, well, are these pets vaccinated or are they not? Should we vaccinate them when they're coming into the hospital? Are they a potential disease burden for other animals? Medical records, and as Gabby said, a recent photo with all the identifying marks and so forth. Again, that's really important with your dogs and cats, but probably even more so with your birds, for example, or your reptiles, because unfortunately a yellow-naped Amazon looks like a lot of other, if not identical to a lot of other yellow-naped Amazons. So if there's something identifying that you can see, like he's got a weird yellow feather or something, or something on his foot, nothing's more frustrating than trying to call a vet and say, that's my bird. And we're like, well, how do we know it's your bird? So again, the leg band and the microchip or something like that would be important. So these are really medical records, emergency contact lists. Like I said, we have a list in the garage. We have a list in the barn. It's really important to have those.
Yeah. And then putting together an emergency kit, not only for yourself, but for your pets. Store it in a waterproof, easily accessible container. And then you'll want to include, a lot of things, and it all depends on how much space you have. But if possible, make sure you have sturdy leashes, harnesses, and carriers to transport pets safely, and ensure that they can't escape. I mean, remember, they're going to be stressed too. Some pets might be a flight risk.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have, the carriers, the crates, the harnesses, they can escape, and it's just going to be too chaotic to be able to just go after them.
Yeah, and just remember, this is not ideal circumstances, and so, just like you should have a to-go bag for you or an emergency evacuation bag for yourself, you should have one for your bird or your dog or your cat. That should include, a carrier, some extra food, and even if your dog is used to eating fresh food or raw food or whatever, I don't care. Throw some kibble in there just in case they need it, and obviously don't have it to be 2 years old. Every once in a while, go back and check it out. But yeah, and then just the to-go bag or the to-go kit for the animal should include food and water bowls, and food and water for at least 7 days. So bottled water is obviously great. A lot of people have that in their garage or in their kitchen. So portable food, water bottle, pre-measured portions are excellent, so you know how much they get in a day in case you have to drop them off at a boarding facility and so forth. Things like having a little manual can opener to open up a canned food of your dog is really important, or your cat if they eat canned food. So these little things you never realize until you're actually there and you're at somebody's house who is kind enough to take you in. You have a can of dog food and they don't have a can opener or something silly like that.
Or get the Pop-Top cans.
Right.
Because then you don't have to worry about it. But sometimes that little thing comes off and then you need a can opener anyway.
Right. Good point. Good point.
That's so frustrating.
I hate that.
So yeah, those are great points. And then information on feeding schedules, medical conditions, any behavior issues, and then the name and number of your veterinarian or somebody who is familiar with them. So if they can't contact you, but one of your neighbors, or you have a close pet sitter, somebody that knows your pet really well, then have that information there too in case you have to board your pet or a foster has to take them in.
Yeah, those are important. And just like with the feeding schedules and medical conditions, obviously their medications are important. So if they have allergy meds that they need, or diabetic meds that they need, or chronic pain medications that you need, I mean, these are hard times. They're going to be kept in uncomfortable situations, so we have to make sure that they're as comfortable as possible. So at least a 2-week supply of any medications, along with instructions, include copies of medical records, as we said. So again, these are for your to-go bag, so make sure you have these things when you're ready to go.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to circle back to the pictures for a second, because I think obviously a current photo is great and everybody has photos on their phone, but something that you can do too is print out a photo and put it on the carrier,
Right.
because then it just really helps. I've had to travel with my pets, and I've had all their information printed and taped to the carrier, their pictures, because then there's no question, and so that kind of makes identification easier as well, because it could say shepherd mix. Well, that can look like anything. So if you have a picture and you have it with the carrier and you can adhere it to the carrier somehow, and an envelope with the in a Ziploc baggie with the information on there too, like anything you can do would be better, because it's just going to make everything so much easier.
Yeah, our carriers all have our emergency phone number on them and the name of the pet at least, and then there's a little luggage tag that has their picture in it.
That's great.
So forth. So that's important. And then obviously comfort items. It's amazing what you forget when these situations happen. That's why it's so important to have these to-go bags. But so something that's easily transported. Bring along your pet's favorite toys or blankets or bedding or anything like that. So just like I said earlier with the reptiles or with the birds or small animals, like a hide box or something, so they can get away from the craziness. Because you don't know, you might be in a shelter with 200 other people in a cot. You don't know what it's going to be like.
Right.
So think about that.
Yeah, and some shelters are having pets come in and stuff like that. So it's really important. Pet waste disposal, so litter box with supplies for cats or waste disposal bags for dogs. It seems silly, but when you're in the middle of a shelter or something and you're trying to scoop out your cat's litter box or anything, and you can use shredded newspaper, you can use unpopped popcorn kernels for a litter box, something in there. It doesn't have to be litter, but just anything that your cat will use, because they they're going to be stressed, and the last thing you need is something happening and your cat's not using the bathroom.
Yeah, and you don't want your dog having to go to the bathroom when you're leaving poop all around the shelter. That's not cool. Because
then they're not going to allow pets in the future. So cleanliness is important.
Exactly. And then, this might seem excessive, but a pet first aid book would be really good. I know we have our phones nowadays, so it's probably a little easier to access, but a book with, a guide with some information on some basic first aid stuff and what to do if your pet gets injured or whatever else that may happen.
Yeah. And then just like the basic stuff, a flashlight with extra batteries, lantern, things like that, because it's, especially when there is so much smoke in the air, it's pretty dark.
Right.
It could be the middle of the day, but depending on where you are, it's going to be pretty dark. So making sure that you can see, because there's going to be a lot of debris. It could be an area you're not familiar with, and so you need good lighting to make sure that you and your pets are safe when you're walking outside.
Yeah, very important. ID tags, extra ID tags. Again, throw one in a to-go bag. Like in your carrier, throw an extra one in there just in case you need an extra collar.
That's a good point.
Really important just to have something there, because again, they could lose their collar, and then what are you going to do?
Right. And then, like Carmine mentioned before, just their vaccine records and just some basic. You don't need, if your dog's 12 years old, you don't need all the medical records, but at least the most recent stuff.
Right.
And making sure that at least you have that one page with their vaccines and then their diagnosis, right? So a lot of them will just say healthy pet or, arthritis, diabetes. So even if you just have that form with you, then that's at least really good information for who's ever taken care of your pet.
Yeah, and a lot of times nowadays, your veterinarians are able to send you records, or it's able to be accessed via your phone. So make sure that if you have a login information for your veterinarian, you can access that, and you can just show somebody on your phone that they've been vaccinated.
Yeah.
A first aid kit, that's kind of a big deal. It sounds a little excessive, but you don't know if your pet's going to get cut on the foot when it's walking through something. It could be broken glass, it could be hot embers. So basic things like, gauze and bandages and scissors with blunt ends, so you don't make things worse, so you don't cut them while you're trying to help them. Adhesive tape and bandages, antiseptic wipes, tweezers, so many things, disposable gloves so you don't get things worse. And there's a lot of good information on Instagram and other places, so we'll have a list on our Instagram as well. But just think about all the basic things. I mean, if you have a basic first aid kit for yourself, it's probably going to be good for your pet as well.
Yeah, and then you can always throw a couple of extra things in there, and something to consider is maybe just having a muzzle in there if they're hurt.
Yeah,
having a muzzle in there, so you can always add a couple of things to your first aid kit that
depending on your animal
will work for everybody.
And if you do use a muzzle, which obviously is good sometimes, make sure it's a basket muzzle, one that they can breathe through, not the ones that go around their whole mouth, close it shut, and all they can breathe through is their nose, because that's really panicking for dogs.
And a blanket if you have to restrain a cat or a bird or something, or a small animal. So
it's also a really good idea.
Yeah, so during a disaster, what can you do to keep your pet safe? So be aware of your pet's needs during specific types of disasters. So if there's like floods, keep them in a safe, dry area away from water, and avoid walking them outside during heavy rainfall, and avoid walking them in deep water. It's some of it is common sense, but when you're in the middle of it, you kind of forget.
Right. And
so especially if you're not familiar with the area, so just trying to keep those breaks really, really quick, out to the bathroom, right back in, and in areas where you can see the sidewalk readily, and avoid like those big when the water's just flowing by so quickly, because especially small dogs, they can get swept up pretty easily. And even like if the current is really heavy because there's so much rainfall, that can make you unsteady on your feet too. So just kind of avoiding that during flooded areas.
Yeah, and remember too, during floods, sewage will come up too. So if you can keep them as dry as possible, because next thing you know, you're going to have your dog who gets E. coli or salmonella or some kind of infection because of the water. Remember, they are literally walking barefooted through all this stuff. So, any skin lesion or anything else can cause a problem. So try to keep them, out of the water as much as you can. Of course, in Southern California, floods aren't our major thing. We're thinking about fires and everything else, but other parts of the country obviously are important.
Yeah.
So fires, keep your pet indoors and away from open flames. Ensure they're not left alone near any potential fire hazards. Those are pretty simple. And again, if you see any fires, it's just so much better to evacuate early, as opposed to your pet getting smoke inhalation or, burns or cuts or anything else. So your house is replaceable. Your pets and your family are not.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important things. So I could care less if my house burnt down. It would be horrible, and I would say that differently if my house did burn down. But my most important thing were my kids and my pets. Everything else doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Family and your pets are part of your family.
I mean, it matters. I don't want to lessen the tragedy to everyone losing their house. But
if
you think about the tragedy of losing your wife or your kid or your pet, it's, I think, exponentially more important than your house.
Yeah. And earthquakes. We do live in a part of the country where there's earthquakes, so secure heavy objects and potential hazards in your home. And then just practice keeping them safe during tremors. Every once in a while there's a little bit of a shake or a jolt, and just kind of seeing how they react. I know in the past when we've had some tremors and waves and stuff, my dogs did not care.
Oh, they didn't?
No, they did not. I thought they were going to alert me, especially when I first moved to California. I'm like in bed, and my whole bed in my room started rolling.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And my dog is sleeping. She didn't care. I was like, aren't you supposed to tell me?
Exactly, yeah.
And so it's good that she wasn't stressed out, but some dogs are hypervigilant and very aware. So just kind of making sure that if there is something, you see how they react too, because then you can
Right.
you can kind of foreshadow how they will be if something gets worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Hurricanes, tornadoes, make sure the pets are with you in a designated safe room away from windows, things that can blow out, etc. So
Yeah.
the safer the room, the better, the sturdier the room, the better,
Yeah.
for sure.
And then obviously you're going to want to communicate during a disaster.
Yeah, this
right?
is really
That's
important.
so important. And we've already said ad nauseum emergency phone numbers. That's so important. But make sure if you have portable charging devices for phones that you check them regularly and you periodically charge them, and that you bring them with you, because you might not be able to take your car. And if you do have your car, make sure that you can charge your phone in your car. Most everybody does.
Right.
But just those things to think about, because you may or may not have the ability to take your car, but it's really important because that's how most people are going to let
Sure.
you know. And if you're I'll let you talk about social media, because I was going to say something, but I didn't want to steal your thunder.
No, the other thing I was just thinking about when you were saying that is in 2003, my in-laws were evacuated in a different suburb than we were, and we were trying to get in contact with them for 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
And they didn't think about the fact that maybe they should call their daughter or their son-in-law or whatever. So
Right.
think about that. Like, people are worried about you, and whether you call them or you post something on Instagram that we're fine and this is
Yeah.
where we are, where people can find you, that's really important.
Yeah.
So people are worried, and it's really important to contact. So social media, like I just said, use social media as updates for your pet if you're separated, and share your location and status if you're able to do so safely.
Yeah, and that's a great point
Yeah.
with updating status, because now a lot of the social medias have like the little banner that says
Right.
I'm safe.
Oh, yeah.
I actually just had a friend in New Orleans on New Year's, and with the tragedy that happened
Oh,
there,
yeah.
one of the first things that you saw was she has family all over the country, and she had the banner, and she just said, "We're safe."
Yeah.
Because it was her and her family, and they were traveling for the holidays, and that just is so important, because they're going to get bombarded with people calling them and texting them. It's going to be chaotic for them if you just post something on
Right.
social media, because the moment I opened it, her post popped up within the first few posts that I had, because we're
Right.
obviously friends, and I was like, oh my gosh, thank God.
Right.
So it can be really helpful to
Social
just-
media is
yeah,
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's sad there is we have so many tragedies back to back to back to back, whether it's New Orleans or school shootings or whatever. When you said New Orleans, I'm like, what happened in New Orleans? I'm like, oh yeah, I
Right,
forgot.
because there's just so many,
so many.
unfortunately.
It's crazy, and now the fires and floods and the cold snap that's going on in the east right now, et cetera. So yeah, social media updates are really, really, really important. But just also remember, some of the elderly people you may know
That's
may
true.
not be using social
That's
media.
true.
These are cool, these GPS tracking devices. I don't know if you've ever seen them for the collars of your pets. They're really, really neat. So they'll tell you where your pet is. Some people I see in the office will actually have them on their dogs all the time.
Yeah.
So those are cool. So they do
Yeah.
help if your dog gets separated from you. So that's where I think a lot of people have them. Some people use them just to track their dog's activity, but
Yeah.
it is kind of fun just to have it, because they're really pretty damn accurate.
They are. And if you don't have one, use an AirTag. So many people have
Exactly.
AirTags. Just hook it on their collar. I
Right.
mean, it's at least something.
Yeah, that's really good,
I
actually.
used to do that with my son.
Really?
When we would travel somewhere, right? So if we went to like Disney or something,
You would AirTag them?
I would put it on the loop of his jeans, and his shirt would cover it. And I'm like, okay, you can't tell anybody it's there. And if you get separated from him, he's like 5 years old. If he sees,
It's probably better than my kids where we put their phone numbers on their forearms.
Yeah,
That's a little more embarrassing.
That's a little more embarrassing. But it's just one of those things, and I totally did it with my son for years.
It's a good idea.
Because you just, especially things get crowded, and nowadays with so many disasters,
Right.
so many shootings, so many
Right.
scary things.
Yeah.
If you're out and about and you have a young kid, and it's, or you go to a new city, not a bad idea.
That's actually an excellent idea. I had never thought about that.
I should have made like a kid specific,
Yeah.
because it was before AirTag, so it was like this other thing, but it worked great.
Right.
And it's like, oh, buy it so you could like hook it on your bike or your keys. I'm like, my kid.
Yeah,
I was like
exactly.
hooking this on my kid, and we used it all the time.
Yeah. That's good. Just don't use those for nefarious reasons. Don't be a stalker.
No.
Don't be weird.
I won't.
Okay.
Now we have like locations, right? Like on the phone. Like I don't need to hook anything on him. I could just check his location.
Exactly.
So special needs and consideration. So a lot of people have senior pets. Many older pets have medical conditions. So make sure you pack enough medications, their health records, and if they have mobility concerns, make sure that when you're bringing your crates and your leashes and everything, if they use assistive devices and you're able to bring them, like specific harnesses or slings or something, just grab them, because it will be easier than trying to drag your dog down the street when they're, a large dog that is having trouble walking. So whatever you can reasonably bring. And booties, if you have booties for them, that'll protect their feet while they're out about. So little things that you can either throw in your kit, like an extra pair to have, because there's going to be a lot of debris and the pavement might be hot depending on where you are. So that's a good thing.
Booties are a great idea.
Yeah.
Stress management. I can't remember. Just recently I saw some statistic about how many pets have anxiety or separation anxiety. So that's really important. So, and pets do get easily stressed, especially in these weird circumstances. So bring things that comfort them, such as blankets or bedding, toys, calming supplements, and your veterinarian may have given you some drugs actually that may sedate them if your dog's really anxious at like fireworks or coming to the vet or whatever. So, gabapentin or trazodone or something that your vet has deemed safe for your pets, or even some CBD might help, or rescue remedy, or any other thing that you can think about that would calm them down or they've used before in the past. I wouldn't use something new that you've never used, and now you have a sedated animal.
Right.
So, but something that will help them be calm in situations, like we've said, blankets, bedding, etc., would be a really good idea.
Yeah, that's really important, because if they're stressed and they see everybody around them is stressed, again, they could be a flight risk. They
can bite, scratch,
Yep.
anything can happen.
Yeah, and it's just, that's the last thing you need.
Stressed and fearful animals. I would rather deal with an aggressive animal than I would with a really fearful animal, because at least I know they're aggressive. The fearful ones, you don't know if they're going to turn around and get you.
Right. And they don't always give you a warning.
No.
And so that can be really scary all around. And again, if shelters are going to allow pets to go in, you want to make sure that they're nice and relaxed so that other people around them don't get hurt if there's that possibility of a fear bite or something.
Right, and you as a good Samaritan, like even if you're not evacuating, I have leashes in my car. We have slip leads is what we call them, but because sometimes I'll find dogs on the street and I'm like, what am I going to do with this dog crossing the road multiple times? And so you don't want to get hurt, so if you can slip a little lead over their neck, it'd be a whole lot better than reaching out and grabbing them and getting bit. So
absolutely.
Don't forget about that.
Yeah, and then, during or after a disaster, you want to check for injuries, right? So look for cuts, bruises, signs of stress, such as panting, especially in cats. Cats really shouldn't be panting. Drooling, any crusty areas on the fur that could be dried blood, any patches of hair loss, and then check their paw pads underneath, in between the toes. All of that's really important to check for.
Reminds me when I was a little younger, I was a young veterinarian, and my dog, who was really active, was running around like crazy, and then the next day she came in and she could barely move, and so I think I did blood work on her. I think I x-rayed every freaking bone in her body to see what was wrong with her, and then near the end of the day she just started licking her pads.
Oh man.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And I turned around, all of her pads were just totally raw because she was running so much. But I didn't even think about that, so thinking about the pads on their feet, if they're limping or whatever, look at the bottom of their feet. It's really, really important. So, and there are symptoms, to be looking for too when your pet's suffering from this stuff. And in particular, right now, we're worried about these fires in this Los Angeles area, but there's so many different things to think about. But, the smoky air, just think about what it does to you. So red, watery eyes, nasal discharge, coughing, open mouth breathing, like Gabby said earlier, elevated respiratory rates, so breathing hard or panting, fatigue, lethargy, anything like that. Just remember that these animals are really sensitive. Birds are extremely sensitive, and if your animal is already predisposed, already has a heart condition, has a heart murmur, has asthma, difficulty breathing, or anything like that, and now you're putting them in a smoky environment, it's really hard. They're already compromised, just like with people, right? People have asthma, don't go in a smoky area, don't be running outside. So don't be silly. Keeping your dogs inside and safe and breathing clean air is really important.
Yeah, because when smoke is present, there is reduced air quality. We see it. We can feel it.
Oh, yeah, hurt your throat.
Yeah, and we both have family in Los Angeles right now and have been doing regular check-ins, but I have family in the warning zone and family a little further away, and they're telling me the air quality is terrible.
It's horrible.
It's terrible.
And it'll be horrible for weeks, if not longer.
Yeah, so stay indoors as much as possible, have air purifiers to improve indoor air quality, and then keep the indoor air clean. You don't think about this, but don't burn candles, don't fry food that can turn it really smoky.
Right.
Or using a fireplace or something, and then keep walks outside short for bathroom breaks only. Don't just, even if you have a yard, don't just let them out in the yard. Like, go out with them, because you never know when an ember or something could, you just don't know, especially with all the wind that we're having.
Oh my gosh.
So go out with them, have them go to the bathroom and come right back in, and then wipe them down if they have any ash or debris on their coat, because that's really important.
Yeah, and like I said, we do a lot of birds, and birds are particularly susceptible and should not be allowed to be outside when any smoke or particulate matter. We've all seen birds who've suffered from smoke inhalation from a Teflon pan burning, from candles that were burning. They're so sensitive. I mean, there's a reason why birds can fly at a high altitude and we can barely breathe. It's because they have a extremely efficient respiratory system, which is efficient for extracting oxygen out of the air, but also very efficient at extracting toxins out of the air. So super important to keep your birds safe. Super, super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and only return home once the authorities say it's safe to do so. Even if a fire appears to be out there, maybe still, embers or hotspots or debris. Check your home for property hazards like fallen branches. You might want to let your dogs out as soon as you get home, but your fence might not even be there anymore, or might be collapsed, scorched areas, potential toxins, etc. But also remember, as I said earlier, that these dogs are literally walking on this toxic stuff. So it might not even be, it might be safer for you to come home than it is your pets. If possible, I would definitely go to your home without your pets, see what you have there. See if you can clean anything up, because remember, they are walking on this toxic stuff. And I mean, trees are one thing, but the stuff in your house, the computers, the TVs, the refrigerators, everything you can think of, they're toxic and they're burned, and there are some really bad stuff going on in there. So one of our neighbors at our last fire in 2019, their house was condemned, but the house didn't burn. It was condemned because of the toxins and the smoke that got into the house and so forth. So there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen. So just be aware of that, and think about your pets are on the ground and touching everything that you're not.
Yeah, and then they're licking their paws. Exactly. And grooming themselves, and then that's, they're going to get sick afterwards.
Exactly.
So we need to avoid that. So keep in mind that once the disaster is done and you're home, your pets may experience anxiety and stress because they too feel all the change and the chaos and don't know what's going on. And then provide a quiet, safe space for them to recover and adjust. Use, calming aids like pheromones, or like Carmine mentioned before, these anti-anxiety supplements or medications. Continue to use those when you're home, because that's really important. And then if your pet gets lost during the disaster, you obviously want to be reunited. So visit local animal shelters, post on social media to be reunited, reach out to people, local veterinary hospitals, do the whatever you can, but hopefully with all the right steps. A lot of people are really great about taking in pets and letting people know and whatnot, but there's so many kind people out there that they're taking in a bunch of pets in their homes. And so somebody may know it's your dog, somebody may not, but call around, see if you can get reunited, because that's going to be really important.
Right. Like I said, that's what we talked about, making sure you have identification tags or, something, paint a number on your horse or whatever you're doing, a microchip, a leg band. These things are super important. So it's hard, but, this is not a fun topic to talk about. It's not like we're always thinking about medical, interesting topics, but this one is so timely and important that, it's so important to take the time to create a disaster preparedness plan for your pet and yourself, of course, and ensuring they remain safe and comfortable as as much as possible during an emergency. Having a plan in place, it'll give you peace of mind. It'll make things easier for you to act quickly. Yesterday we were afraid that our house was going to get a lot of winds, and so we backed up my wife's truck to the horse trailer and hooked it up, just because we were like, okay, I don't know if it's going to happen, but at least it'll be hooked up, and if we have to go, we can go.
Right.
So it's important. So be sure, review plans. The time to review your plans, we knew this wind was coming.
Yeah,
so it's
that's
not
true.
the time to do it when you're stressed out.
Right.
The time to do it is a day or two before, and like, okay, I have all my stuff. I have a to-go bag. I have a to-go bag for my pets. I have my carriers. I have my dog food. I have my pet bowls. I have my heating blanket, a water bowl, etc. That's the time to do it. And you can always adjust it depending on what hurricane is happening. What trauma is happening. This feels like a hurricane.
It could be a hurricane. I know. Well, these winds.
It's a fire hurricane right now.
Yeah, these winds have been out of control, and you're right. Like, don't wait. Obviously, some things are unpredictable,
Right.
so
Right.
being prepared for that. But when you know, hey, it's an increased fire risk.
Right.
It's dry. There's a low humidity. We're gonna have Santa Ana winds. Go over everything. Review your kit. Like, how long has that water bottle been in there? How
Right.
long, has the food been in there? And make sure you have snacks for you too, and stuff like that. Obviously, these are all things that you can also implement for yourself, and that's really important. And then look at resources available. The Red Cross is a phenomenal resource.
Right.
ASPCA, local government or federal websites have a lot of information on there. The American Veterinary Medical Association and the Humane Society, all of these have printouts on this is what you should put in your
Right.
first aid kit, little brochures on like, hey, these are the basic things you should do for to be prepared, and resources on where to get a kit, because a lot
Right.
of these you can just buy off the shelf.
Sure.
And then you can modify as needed. But there's so many resources now.
Right.
It's really important. We'll post some of these on our Instagram, just to make it easy for you guys to refer back to. But there's no time like now to be ready.
And all these resources are really good, but don't forget about your neighbors. We literally have on our 3-block area that we live in, because we're exposed to fire danger a lot. We have a contact list of all of our neighbors' emails, phone numbers, and addresses where they live. And we even have what animals they have. So if someone can get back earlier before everyone else, they can take care of the animals.
That's fantastic.
So we have a really tight-knit neighborhood because we kind of have to in that area. So knowing your neighbors is really important. If you're able to do that in your neighborhood, that will allow such things. So it is really great. And obviously in times of emergency, and any times it doesn't matter, but who cares what religion they are, what part of the political spectrum they fall on?
Right.
Who the hell freaking cares?
Right.
These are human beings, and these are animals that need your help. And all it is just being kind and loving to one another. So just remember, take care of each other.
Yeah, that's so important. And the elderly too.
Oh
Like
my
you mentioned
gosh.
before, they might not have social media. They might not be able to maneuver their cell phone if the battery dies. I mean, I'm not saying that because somebody's older, they can't do anything for
Right.
themselves, but there are people that are caring for their elderly parents.
Sure.
And they might need help, and just be aware of who's around you and who might need extra help. Because if somebody has young kids and they're caring for an elderly parent or a grandparent and they have pets, they're going to be overwhelmed. And if you have the time and the ability to help them out, that's going to be really great.
Yeah, I just heard something yesterday too. Some lady made this suggestion is to, and this is not about your pets, but about your home and so forth, is use your phone and talk about what you have, videotape everything in your house, because
yes.
if something goes wrong
Yeah.
and you lose your house, at least you have video evidence of what was in your house, and it makes it easier to replace these things. Not your pets, of course,
Right.
but even if you videotape your pets, then you can show somebody, if you don't have a picture of them, but in the evacuation you're videotaping them or whatever, so at least you have some photo or video evidence of who they are. So just think about all these little things that you don't think about in a case of emergency.
Yeah, so thank you for listening. This again was just such an important and timely topic. We really wanted to pivot and talk about it today, and we'll have some resources up, and as always, be safe.
Yeah, be safe. Thank you.
Thanks.